Welcome to the Women's Rights Network podcast. I'm Sarah, and I am really pleased to have Vaishnavi Sundar come talk to us today. Vaishnavi, tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a great fan of Women's Rights Network and the work that you do, so it's such a privilege to be speaking with you and your fantastic group of women who would probably listen to this later on. My bio is fairly straightforward. I make films, I write, I'm based in the south of India. And for the past, I think, 4 or 5 years is when I started to acutely see the ramifications of gender identity ideology in India. Therefore, I decided that I will, briefly start talking about it on my social media. I didn't think that I would get much of a backlash or anything like that. I've posted absolutely base level tweets like, men shouldn't be in women's sports, women's safe spaces and things like that. But that suddenly opened the floodgates and in came the Indian TRA trolls and they said all kinds of awful things to me. And that made me wonder about how deeply entrenched it is in India, this whole ideology and the trans and everything. Back when I was tweeting about men shouldn't be in women-only spaces, etc., I was actually thinking about what's happening in the West. I myself did not have much idea about how deep it is in India. But when these people started to say abusive things to me is when I realized, oh, okay, hang on a minute. There's something going on here that I'm very fascinated by. Although on the one side, they are really abusing me online. But that sort of led me towards the direction of finding this whole cult of people in India that are behaving very similar to, perhaps the TRA lobbyists in UK, in US, and things like that. So while I started out as a filmmaker, generally, not really affiliated to a particular brand of feminism, I was just thinking I'll question patriarchy, I will challenge gender norms and things like that. So I started making films that have women at the center of it in its entirety. But gradually, I started finding problems with the way liberal feminism, which I was first introduced to, started the way it was looking at women's rights activism in a sort of a overarching way. And that really made me question the way they were going about this. And when I posted all these things on Twitter and when the liberal feminist trans rights lobbyists came after me is when I thought, okay, I've got absolutely nothing in common with these people. For one, even if I disagree with somebody, this is not how I will go about things. I wouldn't say abusive things to say, for example, I'm an atheist. I haven't gone over to religious people and said awful things to them, But even with the gender ideology in question, if I were to disagree with somebody online, I would do it in a much more respectable manner, lay out facts, try to hear out what they are saying in a very amicable, respectful way. But that's not how they were going about it. And therefore, I decided I didn't want to have anything to do with them. So the filmmaker in me, the writer in me, gradually moved away from the liberal feminist tenets of women's rights activism, or women plus activism that they were doing, and moved to radical feminism. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been making films that are very clearly for women, unapologetically writing about the way all this, the ideological impact it has had in the US and UK, how it is now permeating into India, countries like India, etc.
It is shocking to me the extent to which it appears to be infiltrating into all of Indian culture, given how different, or given the differences there are between Indian cultures, I should say, and the West. One example of that, and we'll come to your film shortly, but one example is an article that you've written. It came out yesterday. So today's the 29th of May. You published an article yesterday about an Indian surgeon looking to, in inverted commas, transplant a womb, a uterus, into a man who calls himself a trans woman. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so this Dr. Narendra Chawla, he's been on my radar for a while, because when I started making Dysphoric, the documentary about the rise of gender identity ideology and the way in which young women were getting lured into it, when I was researching for that project, I wanted to see how deeply it was affecting Indian girls, Indian women, etc. So I was starting to, look online to see if there are surgeons who are sort of the activist type, where they are very active on social media,
like a
making this
certain
whole
Irish
thing.
woman.
Yes, like a certain Irish woman. Yes, indeed. Only TikTok is banned in India, so these surgeons.
Okay.
but much like this particular woman that you're referring to, there were several plastic surgeons, endocrinologists, therapists, etc., who have like pronouns on their bio and things like that on social media. They're openly talking about queer affirming therapy, or inclusive, or intersectional, or this and that, and that sort of a thing. I spotted Narendra Chawla those many years ago, actually, where on Quora he was responding to some of the queries that random people post on, like people do. They just post their questions, hoping that people would respond based on their experience and so on. But he would pop up in all of those very subject matter related questions, and he would post like an expert in the subject, and he would briefly plug some information about his hospital, about the healthcare that he claims to provide, and how much it would cost people to do XYZ procedures and things like that. At that time, he was doing something bizarre, because he was trying to help people get an estimate of how much it would cost to do a particular procedure. But how he was going about it was offering packages, if you will. He was saying, so like for X amount of money, it involves, so you get XYZ procedures done. So which means he was asking people to bundle up the things. So if you are seeking to do just one procedure, he's like, no, do X and Y as well. I will give it to you in that amount of money.
Serious red flags there already.
Yes, exactly. But the gullible people that are online looking for answers about something so life-altering, you don't expect them to see red flags in circumstances like this at all. And he has identified the gullibility of this audience very, very clearly. And he's been at it for years. For years, Sarah, he's been after all these people posting online, responding to them like this well-meaning doctor who just wants to help, no compulsion, don't have to come to my practice, but I'm just letting you know that this is how you go about it. And he's making it seem as if it's just some walk in the park, oh, this procedure, it takes you so many days. There will just be like this one odd disclaimer that results might vary from people to people. Now that would mean anything from a slightly botched procedure to death,
Quite.
Yeah. So that's when I found out about him. And just recently, I think last month or so, media just went on a frenzy with this news. They were all talking about it. They're talking about the possibility of it. Some of the articles, even in India, were discussing about the potential good that could come to the trans community if such a procedure were possible and things like that. It was really bizarre and dystopian to listen to these people discussing these things, read the kind of speculations they were having.
Completely fantastical.
Yes, they are. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And they didn't look at it from a safeguarding point of view. Even for the man who wants this operated, this uterus implanted on himself, even they weren't talking about safeguarding him. Forget about the womb, where they were getting it from, who was donating it, etc. This man is going to have it put on his body, an organ that doesn't belong there, and the complications with regards to infections, the body rejecting an alien organ, so many problems with this, and the very impossibility of the ultimate goal that they were trying to achieve, which is, gestation, potential gestation, and actually giving birth using C-section and things like that. But this one was just like, super confident. You're saying he was citing something that happened, I think, a few years ago in India, where uterus was transplanted into a woman. The uterus was her mother's because she was having some sort of problem and she couldn't give birth. And in India, as you can imagine, the procreation is perhaps one of the most important responsibilities or duties of a wife. You know, you can't not have a child. At the bare minimum, you need to have at least one child. Now, this woman had some problem with her uterus. She got her hysterectomy done. Then they put this her mother's womb, and her mother was subjected to a hysterectomy as well. And then she got pregnant, and then she through IVF, and then they delivered the baby through C-section. Now,
Wow.
imagine all the trauma that this woman went through because that family was desperate to have a child. Now, this should be cause for concern for anyone in general having uterus transplanted between two females as well. But no, it didn't raise any alarms. They were in fact appreciating the surgeon who did the procedure. And it was kind of like a gotcha after she did get pregnant. So the funny thing is, nobody was able to catch this as a problem, but one of the articles that was appreciating this woman's pregnancy, the doctor had apparently told her, if she wants another baby, she needs to start planning it immediately.
So of course she does. Of course she does.
Because then the longevity of the uterus, to make sure that it is still viable, etc. Sort of the life of it reduces significantly over the course of time, right? So they were like, oh, so if you're not planning for another baby, then you should get a hysterectomy done again to remove the uterus that does not belong to you. So this poor woman went through all of this, and she was, appreciated so much, etc. Whatever. Now, I think nobody should be owed the potential for giving birth, through whatever form. If you can't give birth, you can't give birth.
It's sad, but it's not a right.
It is very sad, and I'm very sorry for these women who feel so maternal, who want to have. I completely understand and empathize, but this procedure of taking a uterus from another woman's body, putting it on yourself, and look at this woman, the amount of trauma this woman must have gone through, the number of times these people would have put knife over her body, open it, close it, open it, close it, like it's some toy.
Yeah.
So it mustn't do it. And now they use that as an example to say that uterus transplant between two women was successful. Not only successful, but this woman could actually give birth to a child, the body didn't reject it, etc., etc., etc. Now, this Dr. Narendra Kaushik claimed that the transplant that he was planning to do was from either somebody dead, where he would harvest the organ just before somebody's death, or from an F2M hysterectomy patient who doesn't want her uterus, of all things, actually. So he said that they will take that and put it on this man's body. I just want to clarify the whole conundrum about implant and transplant. I did a little bit of reading online. Implant is something that you do, which is not biological tissue. So like breast implant is an implant, which is silicon. It's not a body part, it's not made of tissue, it's not biological. But even though men don't have uterus, if you install something from another human body to a human body, it would still be considered transplant, is what I read online.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That does still sound very strange.
It does, yeah. So, for example, sometimes even animals' organs are installed in humans, right? Even that is called
we often use pigs. Yeah.
Yes, that's also called transplant, not an implant, because it's a biological tissue. The only thing that would be considered as an implant is if you have an hair implant or a breast implant or a tooth gum implant or something like that. That's not, that's artificially made, etc. Anyway, that's just an aside. So I saw all the antics this man was up to, and I did a bit of digging, and I noticed that he's been at it for several years now, and he's had several foreign, foreigners who visit India for sex change tourism and get their, most of these are men, so they get their breast implants and go through hormonal injections and the whole spiel, and also invert their penis and make a new vagina and things like that. So he's got like this entire YouTube channel filled with people.
So there's nothing he doesn't do.
It seems like his qualifications were a bit, it was not very, he didn't graduate from some great school or anything like that. I tried to read about the schools that he went to. They weren't very, very good. They weren't even particularly specializing in, say, cosmetic surgery or something like that. They were just some schools that he went to that he could probably afford at the time. And his website lists all kinds of affiliations with this plastic surgery association, that plastic surgery association. You look up online, several of which I couldn't find proof of. So he looked like a hugely suspicious person from the word go. And then I looked up some uploaded documents on his website where he has uploaded his degree certificate, his membership with WPATH. Now, this is where things got really interesting. WPATH, anybody can be a member. As in, if you're providing, in quotes, gender affirmative care, anybody can become a member by paying some money with the WPATH. So it's not like a big deal or anything. It's not a glorious thing to have a membership with WPATH. So anyway, so he had this document uploaded on his website. So India, because it's a low-income country, it's considered a third world, etc. And WPATH has provided like a category of membership where you pay only $70 a year or something like that. So for this man who's making so much money, $70 a year is absolutely nothing. Now, not only did he get his own membership sorted with WPATH, he got his wife also to register as a member. There is no mention about her wife in the entire website. There is no mention about her wife's credentials as a medical person or anything like that. But in WPATH website, she's listed herself as counselor, social worker, LGBTQ, something. And the whole thing seemed very dubious. And I realized that on the website, they were also talking about how, well, you need to have this document, that document, and you also need a referral to say that surgery is the only way for you to go forward to deal with gender dysphoria. Don't worry if you don't have this referral. We have some local psychologists who can provide
we'll
you with
do
that
it for
referral.
you.
Exactly. Now, obviously,
and if you're a counsellor or a social worker in India, do you not need to be a member of or registered with any organizations to prove your competency?
Ideally, there are, you should be. There are a few organizations that you can register yourself and put it as a thing of credibility after your name. People do that. But I couldn't find anything about this woman online.
You need a license to practice these things.
Exactly. Or at the bare minimum, an educational qualification to practice. Because some of the universities, when you graduate with, say, an MSc or a PhD or something like that, you immediately become qualified to actually meet with patients after you spend about 6 months or something with some senior person if you want to. The thing is, anything goes in India. I'm telling you, young, like a decade younger than me, young graduates who just come out of college are now opening up practices, on Skype and on Zoom. They're saying that they're going to provide queer affirmative care, and they understand the pains that trans and non-binary people go through. It's very hard to keep up with the number of people sprouting across India because it's a huge country, but anything goes in India. And you can imagine, these people charge you probably less, claiming that they understand the economic situation of the people. So people line up to go to these people. And the scary part is, when you start practicing, if you give a letter saying that this person is suffering from gender dysphoria, that letter is valid enough for you to go get your testosterone.
And none of these people will probably end up in front of any kind of tribunal, unlike Dr. Weberly over here, who's now Mr. Weberly.
Yeah, no, it's very, very rare. And the kind of medical practice that gets into the purview of legal medical malpractice would be something so extraordinary, like a surgeon who, I don't know, they try to do an experimental procedure with, say, a brain or with, say, some other body part or something like that, and by mistake pulled a nerve and that rendered the man paralyzed, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And that also only if the patient files a complaint.
Right.
So in this case, if Narendra Kaushik has had so many patients who were disappointed by his service and has written on social media saying, my friend nearly died under his care or something like that. Now, that would just remain as a social media comment, because unless the person who was affected by it files a complaint against Narendra Kaushik, nothing will happen. Even if that person makes a complaint, the Indian legal system, the criminal justice system is so broken, is so far behind catching up with the amount of cases. By the time this sees the light of day, probably the person would be dead.
So no ethical consideration in the first place and no legal recourse afterwards.
On paper,
that works.
Yeah, everything is quite viable, accessible, a state of the art, use all the adjectives you need.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that when it comes down to an actual case, a medical malpractice case that a person wants to file, lawyers most of the times are not aware about the nature of malpractice, and because right now even the law has been hijacked in India with the whole pro-trans ideology, where even lawyers are saying something very, what shall we say, they're very empathetic towards the trans community in a way that they are overlooking several aspects of it, including the concept of self-ID. So the lawyers probably are not fully aware about what it means to have a botched up surgery where you went to get a penis, but you are now left with permanent UTI. The lawyers might not even be able to comprehend such a thing. So I'm going to go on a limb here and say that in about 5 years, in about 8 years, bodies are going to pile in this country. And then maybe a group of people will pay attention to something that I have been screaming about for the past 5 to 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe they will think, perhaps this woman was not a freak after all. A couple of people have actually killed themselves because the surgery was done so badly. It was not just botched up, it was beyond repairable, actually, that this man who claimed to be a woman had a neo-vagina made in a way that he stank 24/7 of something so repulsive that he couldn't live with himself, and he hung himself. Because, he tried to appeal to the state to say that, not in a way that they were saying, oh, look at us, these people are conducting experiments on us. No, not like that. They were like, trans people need these surgeries, so doctors need to better their game to do surgeries that are perfect, that like that. So I think, how
these surgeries don't exist, do they? Every single one of them is an experiment with almost no follow-up. We don't we don't know where these poor people are, many of whom should never have gone down this path, who are disabled for life. They might be medicalized for life, but still there's no data being collected. There's no proper follow-up. There's certainly no follow-up for those who choose to detransition. And it's as much about protecting them as it is about protecting women's rights, etc.
Yeah. No, this is still like a very modern phenomenon, right? You probably have heard of the Hijra community, where these homosexual, transsexual men who like to cross-dress because the concept of homosexuality is so alien that they think that if they're attracted to men, then they ought to be a woman.
But so all they've ever done is cross-dressed. They haven't previously done surgeries. So okay.
I've done quite a bit of research on that as well. There are some people who just live their lives like that. They probably even have families and children, but they just have this side to them, whatever, But there are other people who are very effeminate, probably driven away by their parents from their homes because they just don't want a child who's not man enough, so on, could be gay. And then they go and join these communities, these hijra communities, because they think those are the people who are like them, therefore they will be understood. And they have this initiation procedure into the community where one other trans identified male will actually do the procedure. No medical experience whatsoever. Much like female genital mutilation, they use a sharp object and they actually just sever the testicle from
wow.
the male.
Okay, so they do that. Oh, right. Okay, I didn't realize
that. They do that. Back when these modern terminologies, jargon didn't exist, going to Bombay was a euphemism for getting a sex change surgery.
Oh,
and
really?
what they did when they go to Bombay is they go to these, random back alleys where these communities exist. They have like these homes and you live in that home, you die in that home, that's your family, etc. So another man will do this procedure for you and that man will become your mother. The scary part is they do these incisions, right? And the man will be left to bleed. They won't be taken to the hospital because in their mind, in their superstitious belief, it is understood that the blood that is gushing out of the body is the maleness that is leaving the body. Therefore, if you stitch it up, some maleness will be left behind in the body, and that's not okay. So
this is removal of testicles, but leaving the penis behind.
It's very unclear as to how exactly they go about it, but they definitely remove the testicles because they don't want testosterone. So whether they get the penis off it, I think it depends on the person in question, but they let the person bleed. They also make them go through this procedure as if they go through, it's actually very insulting to women, but as if they go through a pregnancy and then they are recuperating and then they are coming back to life or something like that.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. Yeah.
They do all kinds of bizarre things, and this has been,
you can see the twisted logic.
Yeah, definitely. And this has been happening for so many years actually, Sarah, that these people, instead of calling out the harms in this very sort of a archaic procedure, calling out the harms of it, what they did was they used that as some sort of a cultural upper hand and said things like, see, these things have existed from time immemorial, therefore transgender exists from time immemorial, therefore justify giving puberty blocks to children. That sort of a thing.
Quite a leap.
Quite a leap. And most of these, the Hijra community people have absolutely no idea about these modern day postmodern nonsense of pronouns and non-binary and all of that nonsense. They just want to be left out. The thing is, they also live a very sad life of bondage because once they are part of this community, they will be assigned with a guru who you have to service for the rest of your lives. And if your guru passes away, you will be given another guru. And you have to pay your guru money every day. And how do they make that money to give that guru? By either begging or by resorting to prostitution.
Oh, what a terrible life.
Yeah, this is the horrible life that people in the West, as well as the elites in India, use as some sort of a glorious sort of a history of, cultural whatever and all of that. Oh God, it makes me want to barf when they do this. And these are the same people who say, oh, but they are so economically downtrodden, but they are so marginalized with absolutely no understanding of what it is that they go through. But they just parrot the same thing, like, you need to be, if I point anything out, they just call me an upper caste bitch or an upper caste bigot because I happen to be from a oppressing caste. I was born in it. You can't choose that, unfortunately. So anything that I say will just get dismissed on the basis of the fact, like how a white woman would be asked to shut up because she's just white and she doesn't understand the way the world works. That's
oppression Olympics. Yeah,
exactly. So you are upper caste, therefore you don't know, you have so much privilege, so shut the fuck up. That's the approach that they go.
But they also have the gall to tell us not to culturally appropriate wearing, I don't know, Mexican hats to a fancy dress party or something, and you're taking hijra as if it's some kind of, example of a way of being that's trans and has existed for decades, if not longer, centuries. Is it a centuries old thing? Yeah,
definitely centuries old, because there's mention of men cross-dressing even in Indian mythologies, and that they couldn't call them gay, so they would say that a male god suddenly became female for a night for the greater good of the world, to be with another male god so that they could procreate or something like that. It is just so bizarre, and obviously it's mythology. You don't take that just verbatim and apply that to your life. It's mythology. That's
cultish thinking as well for you, isn't it? It's not based in reality. It's ideology. It's religiosity. It's
I think nothing seems to be based on reality anymore, actually. Neither the gender ideology movement, nor the women's rights movement, nor just about anything. The education system, everything seems so going south really fast, and it scares me, actually.
Why do you think that's happening?
Well, for one, I think there's been an ideological brain decay that has happened, that has sort of pervaded in an entire generation of people, whether through poor education that they received when they were children, that they are now passing it on to the younger generation, or whether they merely want to not apply their minds, but just very blindly take up something that has been discussed without really approaching it in a scientific way, deciding for yourself whether it's right or wrong, but just taking it and applying it. And to a large extent, the advent of religious extremism in this country has had a toll in the way the education system has been modified as well. So quite a lot of the curricula has changed over a period of time, because the union minister, the prime minister, needs quite a bit of, chest thumping propaganda that he wants to sort of shove down children's throats by putting himself as some sort of a great, amazing leader or something like that, and systematically erasing quite a bit of science, quite a bit of history away from textbook. And this is equally both,
that sounds authoritarian.
Extremely. I mean, if we are just a democracy for namesake, everybody knows that you don't actually have any rights to say that, you live in a democratic country. You're not even allowed to say, you're not even allowed to speculate with whether this is democracy. That's how we are not a democracy. You know that you're not a democracy when you are speculating whether you really do have the rights under the Constitution to question whether there is democracy for an individual citizen. And I know that I don't, but to say that would mean you are pissing the leader in power, therefore you are silenced, which then proves my point that there is no democracy.
And that's so fundamental. It makes sense to me then how something like gender ideology could take hold in India, because you have the fertile soil for it, don't you? The authoritarianism, the caste system, that women have little to no rights, and children, and the homophobia. So it does, because you could think, well, how could gender ideology, which is so very Western and individualistic, how could that take hold in a country like India? But again, you've got the economic incentives, like the surgeon we talked about at the beginning. So what does gender ideology in India look like right now?
Well, you've got the same set of kids online who have pronouns on their bio, who color their hair blue and pink and orange and what have you, and make all kinds of crowdfunders for their in quotes top surgery, bottom surgery, what have you. This is still the educated sort of upper class kind of crowd who I would say are spoiled rotten, and they do all these things in the name of being non-binary, being whatever. And the thing is, there's also a huge influence of pornography in the way youngsters sort of tie gender ideology together with. So if you're into, say, BDSM or watching some sort of it's a sort of pornography where you thrive on pain, that sort of a thing, you if you do dig a little deeper, you'd inadvertently see that that person has something to do with gender ideology. Either they'll have pronouns on their bio, either they'll have colored hair, or a tattoo that says trans rights or human rights, that sort of a thing. Pornography is almost impossible to separate from at least the elitist way gender ideology has infiltrated in the country. Now it makes perfect sense because these children, well, young adults, spend an inordinate amount of time online.
Right.
They get groomed there. They go on dates with probably older men, and they think that it's all liberation, sexual liberation. They talk about, oh, just earlier today, I nearly swallowed a hot tea that I wasn't supposed to gulp down, but I was reading something while I was having tea in my hand, and somebody had written an article that says how non-monogamy can help with the dangers of climate change.
How did that work?
Apparently, if you sleep with several people, you build a sense of community, and that's what's needed to combat climate change.
Did a man write it?
No, it's a young woman.
Oh my word, that's even worse. Oh, the lib fems.
But you can see where they're getting that from, because they're only going to say what the men want them to say, or be what the men want them to be. So if a man doesn't want to commit, he wants to sleep around, he will then say, no, you're a strong independent woman, you should want polyamory, that's your identity. He'll drill that into her head, and the woman will think that it was her idea, and she will say, oh, no problem, you can sleep with me, you can sleep with several other people as well. Now several other people would also be interested in this woman, or for all the attention that she is getting, she might probably be excited for a really long time. But we all know, based on several accounts of women who have had such sexual experience, that this feeling is not going to last very long.
No, it's damaging. It's highly damaging.
Highly damaging, and it is going to hit you like a ton of bricks sooner or later.
Yeah.
And imagine these are experiences that they're having, the sexual experience that they're having, probably one of the first few experiences, and that itself is about choking and spitting and that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
The younger generation's social media is just like a rabbit hole. I do this every now and then for my work, and then I regret it. I immediately have to have a shower or something.
Yeah, you need to cleanse. Yeah.
Yeah. But they have like these choking, they have all these things, right, where you have a strap around your neck that is meant to choke you, and they wear that and have something written on their almost bare chest that says Netflix and means choke. Things like this. So gender ideology in the modern sense, this is how deep it has infiltrated. And there are men who are also claiming to be lesbians on dating sites and are chasing after women to date them. And if they don't respond, they're getting really mad at them, calling them transphobic and all of that.
Well, Nancy Kelly of Stonewall will call them akin to racists.
Yes.
Lesbians who won't sleep with trans women, in inverted commas, with their penises are racists. No boundaries. It's all about getting rid of the boundaries, isn't it?
Yeah. And Nancy Kelly has a very strong role to play in the younger generation's minds in India as well, because Stonewall has very deeply infiltrated here as well. They do quite a bit of academic institution collaboration, and they do all these extracurricular teachings and workshops and things like that. And they also target a lot of these budding sort of startup type organizations where the people that are part of such a company, the demographic is usually fairly young. So they claim to provide an equality index for every company in a way, like, like an accreditation or something like that. So if you're,
that they've done over here very successfully, thoroughly
so you're like
embedded
a,
everywhere.
exactly. So you're like a diversity champion. So if I don't understand how, if I'm gay, it matters at an interview.
No, it's whether you can do
mean,
the blooming job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if somebody were to ask me if I'm gay, I'd be very disturbed in an interview, not think that I want to be part of this organization because they accept me for who I am. But this whole movement of trying to instill this into the young corporate generation is to serve just one demographic, which is male who identify as female, so they get access to female toilets, so they can literally scream at someone who has an issue with that. They're also providing all kinds of schemes, insurance schemes. If you work in a particular organization, you can get your breasts cut off in insurance money.
Oh,
that's part of your...
and I can see that. I mean, the NHS is now offering this for free. One of the trusts has come out and said, we're providing this. Male to female mastectomy. It's thoroughly, it's vile.
Yeah, I noticed it. Is this the one that you're talking about where if you are 17 and above, you can get all surgeries for free?
Yeah.
So you've got to be, that also makes me really scared, because for the girls who have been waiting for so long to get all these things done, suddenly realize that it's all free and there probably is less waiting time now or whatever, they're going to readily go and give up their breast tissues and uteri and everything. Now that makes me hugely suspicious of their intent, because we don't know how they are going to dispose of these organs.
Exactly. Which brings us back to what we were talking about right at the beginning.
Yeah.
How do we know that those uteruses aren't going to end up inside men?
Yeah. Or used for some sort of bizarre Frankensteinian experiment with an animal or whatever.
We're getting into transhuman weirdness.
Yes. And I mean, apart from the horrible way in which this whole thing is being approached, I am actually mortified by, this is something that not a lot of people think about, but I'm mortified by the number of animals that this is being experimented on, actually.
Agreed.
So many dogs, sheep, and it just the thought can render me sleepless for nights. I acidists don't sleep, but just the very thought of these caged animals just drives me literally insane. It has driven me to a point where I've been suicidal reading certain research articles, because I can't fathom the plight of those poor things who don't have the gift of communication like we do.
But are perfectly sentient, feel pain.
Yes. It kills me. It crushes my very soul to think about those animals. I'm sorry, I'm tearing up, but it just is not right.
I agree. And I'm an ethical vegan, and it drives me mad when I see others who call themselves vegan and are, in inverted commas, pro-trans, and I say, but those hormones are being tested on animals. These operations are being carried out on animals. If a woman wants a neophallus and she's having all of this tissue removed from her arm, and then she has to replace that tissue on her arm, and if that keeps failing, they use pig tissue instead. And these experiments on humans are experimental, and all experimental operations on humans start as experiments on animals. And I can see that you're crying, and I feel the same, and I think it's abhorrent. I have problems with it for regular medicine, never mind for this stuff. And it will be being duplicated around the world as well. It's not as if it will only be in India. It could be in China, It'll be all over the world. And this is unethical, and it's abhorrent. And you can talk about wanting to save the planet, but you can't talk about this being okay at the same time. It's not.
Yes, it's absolutely not okay. And to think that, you know, in a country like mine, there are so many dogs and cats that are stray. They
80% of the world's dogs are stray.
Yeah. So there are very few of us humans who care for them and, you know, give them food, give them water during scorching summer and things like that. Now, it's one thing for these animals to, you know, stay in the wild, fend for themselves, beat their predator, run from their predator, or become prey, or whatever. But that's just the law of nature. A human being didn't go and put that poor animal inside a cage and inject all kinds of horrible things into them. They didn't consent to it. How can you then exercise something in the name of science, and do something so abhorrent like this and get away with it, saying that this is for the greater good? I will never, ever, ever get behind an ideology that can put these poor harmless creatures' lives through so much trauma and so much trouble, and even cost a lot of them their lives. I can never get behind something like this.
Absolutely. I mean, it's torture. It's torture of animals, and they prolong that torture, and unfortunately, death can't come soon enough to those poor animals. And of course they're bred for it as well. It's not as if they have pulled strays from the streets, although that sort of thing happens too. They're breeding them for it. We do it in this country. We've got beagle breeding institutes. It's abhorrent, absolutely abhorrent. And we seem to have lost our as a species ourselves, humankind. Do you think we're becoming less ethical over time?
Yeah. And all in the name of inclusion. I just can't get around the irony of this. Yeah. All in the name of inclusion, where we are chopping off trees, where we are killing animals in the name of inclusion. We are pushing women further down the abyss of the exploitation in the name of inclusion. You know, sometimes I think the world is just playing a really cruel joke on us, and one day they're all going to turn around and laugh at us and say, oh, we made a huge joke, we played a prank. It's just so funny that you think that this could be real. I constantly keep thinking one day will come when whoever this person is will turn around and say, it was all a joke.
Well, or we're actually just in a big computer program and somebody was running an experiment to see what would happen.
Seems like it, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, the will to carry on doing the work that we are doing is hard enough as it is. And to sort of expand our scope of our work, to see the actual ramifications of other species, the nature itself, is even more crippling to me. You know, there are days when I just spend the whole night researching something and then carry on working the whole morning. I should be able to go to bed and just fall asleep for hours and hours, but I cannot shut my eye. I cannot stop this noise inside my ear. I just live with it now. And that's how cruel I feel this whole thing to be. Even, I mean, if you can't approach this on a base level, legalities, semantics, how are these people going to understand about the harm it causes to nature, or to animals, or anything like that? It won't even enter their thick heads.
No, if you can't call things by their proper names, then you can't define it. If you can't define it, you can't create effective laws. If you can't define it, you can't do science.
Yep.
And that almost seems to be done on purpose.
Yes, seems like it. You know how you had the thing where if you were even a man, you were asked if you were pregnant or something like that. Was it Was it UK or US? I think it was
So
US.
in the UK now, if you go for an X-ray, the radiographer has to ask you if there's a chance that you're pregnant, and it doesn't matter who you are; they have to ask everybody. There is an example on it was on social media, but I have a good account that it was true of an elderly man being asked. It's just if you're going to ask elderly men if there's a chance they could be pregnant and you're in a national health service, do I really want to be treated by you? Do you know?
Exactly.
But of course, a lot of these members of staff, they know it's nonsense, but they can't not ask it because of their job's at risk. Yes, and you end up this awful authoritarian, totalitarian. It does remind me of the stories of how it was in the USSR or in Eastern Germany and so on, where everybody knew it wasn't true, but they had to say it like it was.
Yeah, that's what Dr. David Bell says in Dysphoric as well. And just earlier today, I was ranting to my friend. He said that it's not like under Hitler, everybody thought that they were an Aryan race that was somehow superior and that the Jews need to be killed and gotten rid of, something like that. Like they had this very clear, singular goal and objective that they were marching towards under the instruction of this one man who thought that they were superior. So Dr. David Bell said something so profound, and every time I hear it, just gives me goosebumps. He says that it's not like they didn't know that they were not superior. It's not like they really believed that they were superior, but they didn't want to confront the fact that they know that they were not superior.
Mm-hmm.
A man, I mean, a person needs a great deal of self-confidence, sort of a conviction to concede and say that I was wrong. It's the most hardest thing to do.
And that's why I like science, because it's constantly trying to prove things wrong. You test and you retest, and you the only way that you can get to the bottom of things, find out the facts, find out the evidence. The only way you can do evidence-based healthcare is by carrying out ethical experiments where you look at something and you say, okay, I'm not sure if the results of that experiment are actually the case. Let's replicate it. Let's see if it happens again. And let's keep doing that. And if we keep finding we are getting the same result and we've got a highly effective methodology, we've done everything the right way, okay, well, then you can say that that's probably a fact, that's probably true, that's probably evidence. But if you don't do that at all, or you do it badly, then you can't, you need to keep disproving. You need to keep attempting to disprove. And that's true of our own beliefs as well. So if I have a belief, I will quite happily go back and check that. My work is scientific, and I have to go back and look at it and go, okay, I thought that was the case. Am I right? How am I going to work out if I was wrong? And if I was wrong, I would rather know that I was wrong so that I can get to being right.
Exactly.
And I would rather other people told me if I was wrong and then provided good reason and show it, because I need to get things right, because what I do affects other people. And if I'm not doing it right, then there's a whole load of other people out there who are being affected by me doing it wrong. And I care to get it right. And I think the kindest thing you can do, the whole be kind, is actually get it right.
Yep.
And be honest when you haven't.
Yeah, exactly. You said about experiments and making sure that you are absolutely convinced about something before rolling out something on an experimental basis. The very fascinating thing about all this, the neo-pro-trans offshoots in this country, Indians love numbers, just like anybody would actually. Indians love this whole thing about 95% people think whatever. They're suckers for this sort of a statistic, which without realizing what the sample size was, or whether these people were a random sample, or were they coerced, that sort of a thing. But they just will stick to the fact that 95% people are transitioning and are happy with it, then it must be so great. I recently realized that ever since I've made this e-zine, and I'm starting to sort of unearth all these issues with the gender ideology in India. They are actually citing some of these papers, but those papers could just as well have written by my grandmother
or a 5-year-old.
Or a 5-year-old in the I don't know, in the garage or something, because they were bored. That's how poorly made samples they are. Yeah.
Self-selected samples online on Facebook.
Exactly. And some of them even had some sort of a seemingly scientific way of saying that they basically just asked random people, and that's what they have put down as a paper. They said something like expert discussion or something like that. Discussions with expert. I mean, who's an expert? What is the subject matter? Whether somebody is happy with their surgery. Now, anybody who got the surgery is the expert. Okay, you're not talking about this to say somebody like Dr. David Bell, for example, who would tell you that there are harms associated with it. So you pick your experts, you call them experts, and then you base your entire study on those experts' opinions and say that 95% of people were happy with something like that. And people like UNAIDS and others who are setting their footing very firmly in India and also propagating trans ideology are actually using them as sources.
Yes, yeah. And the likes of WPATH as well. It's just a bunch of blokes who got together and decided let's do it this way, let's do it that way, let's put a few things down on paper. That's all that happened. That's all that happened. And that there's absolutely no good reason to have to even bear it in mind, never mind follow what they recommend. You could completely ignore WPATH and be perfectly ethical. There's absolutely no good reason to follow a single thing they have to say.
Yeah, and they're not, and they're just providing you guidelines. It's not like It's not like they have an authority of any kind, actually.
None.
But all these people are like, oh, WPATH recommends this and that, as if that gives the whole whatever bullshit experiment that they're doing somehow some sort of a legitimacy or credibility or something like that. Who is WPATH? If people find out, it's just like, people are just really so superficial in that they think, or rather they assume, if you have like a world health professional or something, they don't go further and investigate the the credibility of an organization like that. What is their power? Can they dictate terms to hospitals? Can they dictate terms to government? Or are they just a group of blokes, like you said, who just got bored and they wanted to ruin the world?
Quite. So the lack of governance. There's no accreditation. There's no auditing. There's no follow-ups, and a lot of worldwide copy and pasting has gone on from one sets of guidelines finding their way into laws and into HR documents and protocols, and it's just everywhere. And it's a big fight, but you are part of that big fight. And you've mentioned a few times your film, Dysphoric. Tell us about your lime soda films.
I started making films, I think, sometime in 2013 or so. And my first film was a fiction, not a documentary, about this. It was semi-autobiographical, actually, about this little girl who gets her hair cut by a barber near her house. It's not some salon that rich people go to. It's just some barber. We live in a village. So she goes there, and she goes there when she used to go there when she was a child. And then there was a time when she suddenly feels that she no longer wants to get her hair cut by him. Nothing sexual. The man doesn't do anything to her. It's just a coming of age for that girl mentally, that she realized that she just is not comfortable there anymore.
Yeah.
And then he knew that she is probably not coming back. And then he's just taking a moment to be thankful for that friendship that they shared.
Oh.
So this is a true story, actually. I lived in my grandma's house most of the time, and this barber shop was right next door, and it's basically me. And I know exactly the point when I stopped going to him and whatever. Of course, the recreative part was, my assumption that this is how he must have seen me walking away. But other than that, everything is pretty much autobiographical. So I've made that film, and I realized that any film that you make must have a film company name to say that it's under so and so film production or film company or whatever. Now, I happen to really like lime soda. Okay. And I looked up online to see if lime soda films was taken, and it was not. And I immediately bought it at that
it's a
time.
good, refreshing name.
It is. And I wanted my film company to be like that also, like very, sort of a source of water for somebody with a parched throat, or that sort of a thing, like a happy, like a sort of a refreshing sort of a film company. Anyway, that's how I named it, Lime Soda Films. And there were the days leading up to that, I spent unnecessarily inordinate amount of time wondering, coming up with some really cool, like Latin or Greek names or Spanish names, that sort of a thing. I'm like, I have to get really creative.
Yeah, you can spend hours on that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I ordered lime soda, and I had lime soda, and I'm like, okay, that's how simple it was.
With it, yeah.
And all those days of unnecessary emotional toil amounted to nothing, because then I thought, well, not only do I like the name, but it is just so simple and people can easily remember it, etc. So that's how it came to be. And since that first film, I have made quite a few fiction as well as non-fiction films. But the one that mostly got me into a lot of trouble, as well as into a lot of great friendships, such as with yourself and all the women at Women's Rights Network as well, is the film that I made called Dysphoric. Basically, it's a 4-part documentary on the rise of gender identity ideology and my understanding that how it lures young women to flee womanhood. And that's the whole approach that I took while making the film. So it seems like a long film because it has 4 parts, but I know how hard it was to limit it to just 4 parts.
I bet.
Because
how many hours ended up on the cutting room floor?
I think they had a good 20 hours.
Yeah.
A good 20 hours from all these women, experts, men. They just had so much to say, and such just so profound knowledge and intellect that they were willingly giving me for free. I just couldn't possibly edit anything out.
It's very difficult to edit when you've got such amazing content, isn't it?
Yes. But that came out, and a lot of people came to know about it. And I think with Dysphoric, they came to know about Lime Soda Films as well. But parallelly, what happened was, until that time, Lime Soda Films was known as this company that I make films with, and Indian media houses used to write quite a bit about it, about the films that I make, about any film festivals that my films got selected to, etc. But ever since I made Dysphoric, 2 things happened. One, my films stopped going to film festivals because they just wouldn't select them anymore. And 2, Indian media stopped writing about me.
So you got cancelled.
Totally cancelled. I used to write for a lot of media companies as well. Those were all taken away too. And I mean, to be absolutely honest, there is not a single source of income for me in India right now.
Really?
Because there are, as it is, very limited places that I can actually approach to work alongside, because there needs to be some sort of a political level playing field, isn't it? You can't just basically go work for anybody. So as it is, my options are very, very limited. In that, if they are very pro gender ideology, they don't want to have any association with me. So I reject quite a few and select a few, and those few reject me. So I have at the moment, I could also make these, ad films for corporate companies,
Yeah.
do these ad campaigns or whatever. But the thing is, I find myself incapable of sitting through a single meeting without having red flags about either the company or the CEO or who the marketing person is. Something about them is just so definitively
Off.
ringing, in my head, that I just stopped trying to make these ads, because ads could fetch you some amount of money. You make nice ad and then word gets around. Other companies will want to work with you and so on and so forth. But I've become that sort of a filmmaker where I've just now shut myself away from the world in a way that I just make my films and try and um, create something for the world that way, rather than just my soul in the crossroads of hoping that there might be some money or something like that. But I can't do this corporate gigs. I can't um, sit through these meetings where they just spew absolute garbage. So I've just given up on all of that. Lime Soda films still exist. Anything that I make will still be under Lime Soda, but I just do my own thing right now.
And what are you doing right now? What films are you making at the moment?
Yeah, after Dysphoric, there was quite a bit of conversation that I happened to read about online with regards to older women whose husbands have transitioned and left them, or partners who have transitioned and are insisting that their spouses or partners stay back in the relationship and accept them as lesbians and so on. So it was something that I was just reading online, which was fascinating, and a few trans widows, as they call themselves.
Yep.
But in my film, not all of them were married. So technically that phrase, but everybody is happy to just use that as a label, as an identifier, if you will.
Sure.
So I'll also use that for them. So a couple of trans widows I got in touch with, and conversation started. And the idea started brewing in my mind in middle of last year sometime. And then last year I came to Philia, and I wrote to one of your guests at Trans Widows Voices, Tinsel. I met her while
she's amazing. If anybody's not heard it, do also listen to our Trans Widows Voices podcast.
Yes, it's amazing. I highly recommend it.
She's great.
So Tinsel is obviously like a powerhouse. She's just so amazing. She doesn't mince words. She is just so clear in her head.
Absolutely.
And her advocacy is just so stellar. And yet, not a lot of people know about the work of trans widows, or the life of trans widows, or the plight of trans widows in general.
Or they don't want to know.
Yes, exactly. But they do know about the stunning and brave spouses that abused them. That left these women behind, who didn't ask for this life, but are now given that life, and they are not even allowed to say their side of the story. And that's what really bothered me, because anywhere I look, I'm just like, oh, this man is now, top female Forbes, whatever. What about his wife? Bruce Jeremy and Caitlyn Jenner, what about his wife? Who's talking about what's she feeling? Okay, this is still very, very elitist sort of examples, but what about ordinary people, men who do this? Because we do know that the number of people that are identifying as whatever, the number is just increasing exponentially by the day. So all these men must have a wife or a partner or a family that they have left behind. The narrative that we hear from them is that family doesn't understand them, family is so transphobic, whatever. And I realized that, having listened to all these women, they were beyond supportive to their partners. Each and every one of them were beyond supportive to their partners, and yet the kind of horrible things they spew about the families is just, everybody knows that. I wanted a film in which these women can share their version of their story without having to worry about being censored.
Good.
Or being told that you are wrong. You are just supposed to accept your husband as, or a wife as she is, and it's just how it is. There are all kinds of angles that I'm taking. There's a legal angle, the challenges of name change, the sex change, and all those things. And there are psychological angle that I'm taking, anthropological, sociological, feminist angle that I'm taking. Much like in Dysphoric, aside from the views of these experts, these women who experience all these things, there are also other subject matter experts. Will then the interviews haven't begun yet, but there will be views from them who then talk about, they juxtapose that with the condition of the society right now, like how it affects regular people and why it is a concern for women's rights movements and things like that. So I have now finished 20 interviews for the final film. But before that, I spoke to nearly 30 women, some of whom, for all kinds of reasons, couldn't be in the final film.
No, that's understandable.
But they were kind enough to give me their time, for which I'm eternally grateful. And I also completely understand why they can't be in the film. So absolutely fine. So the main chunk of the film, the interview part of the Transferos itself is done. I now move on to interviewing the subject matter experts. And then there are quite a few of them who are actually going to be anonymous. So I'm employing, much like in Dysphoric, I'm employing some mixed medium where there'll be some animation, some Zoom recording, some mixed medium presentation with stop motion animation and that sort of thing.
Nice.
So there's quite a bit of work to do, but I'd like to think that with every passing day, I'm inching closer to the finished film. Even if I'm dreading to open my computer and listen to these women's stories again, I'm thinking it's good. It's got to be done. It's got to be done. One step at a time. Move forward. That's just how I, like, sort of a self-affirmation thing that I tell myself.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense.
Focus. That's what I do. But that's the upcoming film, and I'm really, really, really so proud of these women, and I'm just so grateful that they trusted me. They're all amazing, and it's such a shame because I'm so angry that there is not a single media with a little bit of spine to even for a even as on an ethical level, couldn't be bothered to get an alternative version, the other side of the story. I'm just so angry with all of them. And in India as well, I also always get this stick where, oh, she's just an Indian filmmaker who constantly makes films about white people or something like that. I get this within the Indian social media community all the time. But it's next to impossible to find a woman whose husband has transitioned in India.
Oh.
There was a news article that came where in the northern part of India, where a woman had applied for divorce because her husband expressed a desire to do sex change surgery, and she thought there was nothing in this marriage for her, and she opted for a divorce, and the judge granted it. This became news, but we don't know who that woman is, and there is no way for me to contact her. I'm going to try my best, but I, at the very minimum, will at least lay the land for the circumstances under which these things happen to women in India, and how women will be prone to even more abuse and violence in the hands of men. Because I know India is so porn sick that they probably won't even know the term AGP or something like that, but they are probably finding out about these kinks from pornography. And there are Indian subreddits called Indian sissies, where grown-ass men wear their sisters and wives and mothers' clothes and click pictures and say provocative things on the title or whatever. These men exist, which means their wives exist as well. But it's just next to impossible to reach her. And furthermore, to convince her to be in my film, where she is talking about her experience, even though she's not going to say anything against him, she's going to speak for her. And yet I know I won't be able to convince a single woman to speak about it. I will find a truckload of women to speak about how transgender ideology is great, though. I will get a lot of them. I will get so many of them. It will be so crowded that I will, be spoiled for choice. But I don't want those stories. I want the stories of these women. So I'm going to try and see if I can find somebody. But if anything, I'll at least give a sense of how deeply entrenched this is in India, in a way that we can at least leave with the knowledge that it's there. Maybe these women will come forth at some point in future. Maybe somebody will watch my film and think that this is a story about her. Maybe in the future I can make a very India exclusive film about trans widows. I don't know. But these are all like I always think I dream. I really dream such things that that my film could have that potential, that somebody might have a change of heart or might feel empowered enough to come forward at about something, anything. I want to believe that, I want to dream that. So if I can't find somebody to directly speak about this, I might explain the situation, maybe expand it to say how difficult it is for South Asia, like Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan as well, because all of these countries are extremely homophobic and entrenched with gender ideology, and porn sick. All of us are. All the men are. So it'll be interesting when I get to the India part of the film, but that's my upcoming film. And I don't think it will be done this year. My hope is that it should be done in the first quarter of the coming year.
I can't wait. I think it will help thousands, tens of thousands of women over the years to come, definitely. I think dysphoric is already really helping to peak a lot of people. I think it's almost like is this the right word? Primer? If you want to know about this topic, go to Dysphoric. It's available for free on YouTube, isn't it? That particular film.
Yes, all 4 parts for free.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet. And if you have, please do use it to help other people know about the dangers of this ideology. It's such a well-made film. I think it's fantastic. If people wanted to support you, given that you are cancelled in India, how can we do that?
I will constantly be needing funds to make the films that I make. I'm also in need of funds to constantly expose the infiltration of gender ideology in India. I run a website, I have a post it. Expenses are plenty. So I always tell I tell the universe that if there is some extra cash that you want to give away, and you feel like you consider my work to be important enough, then I always welcome women to make a small donation. The amount really doesn't matter. I know for a fact that women have profusely apologized when they're sent like a small denomination. And I'm thinking, woman, I could hug you right now. I mean, if she is sending me $5, Sarah, I'm thinking, she probably doesn't have much herself, and yet she's giving me $5. It just blows my mind. And I don't think that amount is small. I think that I want to do this work so much more because I want to make that $5 worth it.
Yes.
For her.
Yeah.
That's just my goal, really. So I always say that women can definitely send any small donation that they have towards my work, towards my written project or my film project, whatever it is that they want to do. Or if they want to do something like make a screening or any such event that they think will be of use, I'm more than happy to participate in all these events. And this needn't even be for money. I'm more than happy to participate in any of these events, even otherwise. But I'm just saying that if they want to do it where it doesn't seem like they're just taking money from some people and handing it over to me, we could work a way in which I could do like a workshop, or I could show any of my previous films, or I could talk about a certain topic for a certain niche audience, anything like that. I'm happy to do it. I just see it as an opportunity to reach out to more women, maybe make new friends, and hopefully find some kind-hearted benefactors who would be interested in some of my work and be able to help me at some point in the future. So that's it. It's like we are a small group of people. We are a minority. Unfortunately, we are having to use our own funds within our own communities because Others are not able. So that's something that
we are not
breaks my
funded
heart,
by
really.
right-wing evangelist Christians in the US.
We are not.
Or Russia. I haven't had my rubles
we're all
yet.
really hardworking women who
Yes.
save a single penny where possible,
Yeah.
and we try and set out money to give to charities, to give to projects that we like and everything. So it just really breaks my heart that it is always us. We're funding each other. Once there's this campaign, and then there is that campaign. It breaks my heart. But unfortunately, I hope we will be at a time when the number of people that see us, see our ideology to be the hill that they want to die on, there will be more of us, which means there will be more in terms of financial pool, which means we will have more projects, which means we have more creative people in the community as well. So that's how I look at it, as the radical feminists, to be one large universe of people where we have new people coming in every day.
Yeah.
And our the financial strain will get somewhat mitigated that way when more of us are speaking, more of us give $1 every month,
True.
rather than two people just give $10, $100, that sort of thing.
True.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Where can women find you online?
Well, I'm on all social media as Vaishshax, that's Vishhax. And if you look me up, if Vaishnavi radical feminist, I'll show up in a lot of groups where people are talking shit about me. So that's where you can find me.
Well, but sorry, go on.
But the website that I write my e-zine and post about all the talks that I do, everything is vaishnavisundar.com. It's just my name without any space.com.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to. I love when women write to me on social media. I really appreciate the time that they take to find me, and then they send me like a line or two saying thank you or something like that. It just makes my day, because it is bloody lonely otherwise.
True.
All the horrible things that we say about social media, I think this is the single most plus side about it. This is the only way we can connect with women from around the world. So I'm really grateful for social media for just that one reason, nothing else.
I agree, and I'm grateful that you're here and you're doing this work, and that I've had the opportunity to meet you, even if it's virtually at the moment, hopefully in person in future. I think the Women's Rights Network is a perfect example of how you can use online presence to the good. Lots of women meeting online and then meeting in person, making things happen, grassroots work, really putting in the hours, putting in the resources. So many women volunteering their time and their effort and their skills. It's amazing, and punching above their weight, to be honest. I absolutely think that there are lots of women's organisations out there. There's WDI as well. You're a representative for India, aren't you? Amongst many others. And I think women need to find where they feel is the best fit for them. But the Women's Rights Network, I think, is a absolutely great organisation. Really pleased that you've come to talk to us on the podcast. Hopefully this won't be the last one. And
oh no, you're not getting rid of me now.
No, good. And all of those places that you mentioned where women can find you online, we will put that in the description. So do go have a look at Vaishnavi's website, including Lime Soda Films, and following you on Twitter and so on. And if you can't afford to give any money, please do at least give a retweet and share Vaishnavi's work, because it's amazing. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. Thank you.
Pleasure.